now, the number of people living in Bennington has increased, and so has the need for people to protect and serve.
John Chapman reporting that town is working to keep up with first responders and some other needs of a growing community.
The town of Bennington is rapidly building itself into a city. For Police Chief Andrew Hilscher, that means more property to protect and more people to serve.
We have a lot more traffic coming because the house is being built, so it's important to have this community safer, to have more officers on the street.
Chief Hilscher was the only officer on the force when he was hired about 4 years ago. Now there are 5 full-time officers and 6 part-time. Right now the department is dealing with an outbreak of graffiti.
This is not the first issue we've had with graffiti. We had some issues back in January as well. We were able to identify that suspect recently. About 90% of the crimes that have been committed in Bennington have been solved.
Brittany Griffiths and her family moved to a new housing development in Bennington about a year ago. She believes increased police protection comes with the growing population.
Well, since we have so many people and, people just brings potential problems. So having that support and having the police, have a force that supports the growing of the community is important to me for my family. Brittany
would also like to see business grow in Bennington. She says right now there's not much to choose from here.
I would just love to keep my money here in Bennington. We moved here specifically for the schools, but we have to kind of drive into Omaha to grocery shop.
Maxwell Kochek and his family want to change that. They've invested in a business in downtown Bennington.
Something to spur up the community and get people roaming around again, people coming in and shopping, getting their ice cream and coffee.
Maxwell sees more than the business end of growth here. He also volunteers to serve the community.
Since I volunteer as a firefighter, we've seen a huge growth in population, and that has spurred a lot of things from, like you said earlier, the police station hiring more people, and Bennington's fire department hiring more people. And I think just the growth in general has exploded in Bennington.
They sell coffee and ice cream at Cup and Cone, and they're hoping to grow their business as the town grows into a city.
Just revamping downtown to be something as a place that people can come as a destination where there are some shops for shopping, food to eat, little boutiques, little things like that would be really cool.
On your side in Bennington, I'm John Chapman, 6 News.
There are 2,026 people living in Bennington. That's a 39% increase from the last census.
More news.